director, Jay Minari, so hello to you. And
Hello.
today we are going to be chatting to Harry Fear, director of Gaza, Still Alive, which is up for Best Documentary Film. Now, a bit about Harry, who was born and raised in Oxford, and his television, radio, and documentary career has taken him to 29 countries around the world. Harry's best known for his reporting on the European migrant crisis and for his hard-hitting coverage inside the Gaza Strip, especially during the 2012 and 2014 Israel-Hamas conflicts. Harry, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
No, it's pleasures all are. So, Gaza Still Alive. Can you tell us a bit about that production and what made you want to show it to the world?
Yeah, I just really felt that there are so many deficiencies in the news making process as a TV reporter, and having sort of covered a conflict and another conflict in Gaza in a news medium, sometimes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, sometimes a 1 minute live, sometimes a 20-minute documentary. I just wanted to do something which just went a whole level deeper in terms of the medium, the style, the questions, the humanizing, and the story, like just to see things at a deeper level. And for me, that was actually to ask the question, what's going on inside people's minds? Because if you see Gaza stills, still photographs, you may have images of a war-torn place, and of course there are those scenes, but at the same time, in a sense, it's just a normal place in the Middle East, and you can find on other websites photographs of Gaza that show five-star hotels. So there is a whole gamut of reality in Gaza, and often we just look at it in a specific kind of conflict-led way that really has visual stereotypes, I guess. And I wanted to just break that all down and just get right into the kind of the depth of what is the conflict and what does that mean for civilians. And that's why Gaza Still Alive is a return trip to Gaza to ask, how are people? What is the silent, invisible story behind what you see? And what are the kind of long-term prognoses for the conflict, given things like war trauma and all of that kind of psychological injury? So that's the whole concept of the film.
Yeah, and definitely within the film, you look around the trauma of the people there, particularly mental health, because mental health catastrophe there is such a big part of the documentary with the population of the Gaza Strip. So can you go into a bit more depth about the issue for that and how it's affecting the Palestinians, and in particular the kids that are in the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, part of the kind of context of that is, okay, well, it's kind of a Westerner visits Gaza and sort of cares about the place, but is basically imposing a kind of European concept of human suffering onto a Middle Eastern population with the whole kind of psychologizing the conflict. And, there will be people who consider it like that, but, I don't really agree with that empirically, because the terms of reference that the psychologists in Gaza use are the ones that we're following. And if they see it as a conflict which is fought at the psychological level and lives out at the psychological level, I think that that is actually rather their story than us asking questions that are alien. And in fact, part of the war trauma story there and how people heal with and deal with it is that the folks there who work in the mental health community there, they come up with their own treatments, basically, for their context that work for their population and culture. So just as a caveat, really, psychology is a human thing. It's not a Western thing, in a sense. So that's an important background, because I think that it levels the playing field. And also it allows us to understand, well, we have our own mental health crises in the UK or in Europe, and that means different things for different families and people. But they're dealing with, widespread depression on top of war trauma. We're not talking about trauma from a breakup or trauma from a problem at work. We're talking about those things, and also the risk of having lost your life. And in as much as Gaza is a very small piece of geography and sort of roughly 2 million people, you can say that the vast majority of people have suffered war trauma symptoms, because, you can't leave the place. So you're stuck there, and so you suffer. And that's part of the mental health story.
Yeah,
When we
definitely.
were waiting for you to come in the Q&A session before, we were me and Joe were thinking about the movie, The Boy with the Striped Pajamas, and the difference between the Jewish child and the German child, and the one of them that was already an adult. And we were considering the fact that if you don't play anymore, you can't really be considered a child. So how I wanted to focus a little bit more on the kids' art exhibition, the one in which the kids were putting their own toys and covering them, in blood, and how this, in a way, showed how much this condition is affecting the most delicate and the one that is supposed to be the most cheerful time of their life, the childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really hard one. I think what I said before about the kind of the seeing it in two poles, the kind of East and Western thing. Although I don't think that's relevant, I think there is a dichotomy which is relevant, which is this: that the kids suffer, as you see, and even young children suffer, and that really impacts their lives. However, at the same time, and this actually adds to the tragedy of it, it's important to remember that they're just like us. They're just humans, so they suffer, and that's part of the pain of it. But at the same time, life has to go on, and so we see those manifestations and visualizations of the trauma that's within people, but also there's also the attempt to try and live a normal life in spite of all of this. And the visualizations that we see there in terms of those toys and this kind of thing, that's actually part of the treatment process. So actually, in a perverse sense, they're actually the lucky ones, because they're actually having professional help in order to actually deal with what's stuck inside them.
Right.
So there's lots of paradoxes in this situation, and I think those speak to the paradoxes of the human condition and what it means to be a human. Certainly, I think that you talked about other stories and other conflicts. You talked about the Jewish suffering and all of these things. Yeah, there is resonance.
Oh, I believe we may have just lost Harry. If you bear with us.
Okay, he's certainly still alive. We will just need him to log in back again. Sorry, we are in live stream, so these things may happen. We will bear a few minutes probably, because it happens, sometimes connection doesn't work for people, and it's all right. But in the meantime, we are waiting for Harry to connect back. I think what he stressed is a really good point. Like, even the people that we, in a way, think they are the most traumatized and showing in their artworks what's happening in their mind, they are in a way the luckiest one, because at least they have someone like a psychiatrist who can dedicate the time to them to actually let them express what is inside, and giving them the tools to express what is inside. So maybe they will go through the trauma and will be healed somehow.
Definitely. And especially when our audience go and watch this documentary, we'll see you see part of a meeting of the psychiatrist, and you see how many are there and how many wanted to help these people who've had their lives changed, which again is just such a fantastic thing to see.
Yeah, it's definitely also the topic of immigration. As soon as he comes back on, we should talk about immigration and how this is reflected in the mental health situation, because it's so connected. The fact of moving from a place to another, the fact that these people are imprisoned in their own country, they can't leave and leave the country. So it's it's one of those topics we have really to discuss further more in deep. And I think he's back on live with us. Thank God. And we were having him in 3, 2, 1, go. We have him back. No worries. We hold them for you. We kept talking.
Some kind of destiny is conspiring against the technicalities of this life. I'm sorry for that. Just to pick up, you talked about the other stories of suffering, and I think that for me, having spent quite a lot of time in Gaza as a journalist, filmmaker, really storyteller, and having made that investigation in the mental health, I think there is resonance out of Gaza as a ripple, really, with this film, and what we hear and what we see in it. and as I say, it kind of ripples across the human condition in terms of the paradoxes, in terms of the stories of mental health and people trying to find resilience in spite of the situation. Yeah, in a sense, I suppose to put it another way, what we see in Gaza Still Alive reflects something in Gaza which is really a microcosm for the human condition, or for human stories of resilience or suffering or resistance.
Yeah, definitely. And me and Joe were just going up while waiting for you to come back to the session. We were talking about the migrant crisis, everything's going on there. And even in the documentary, we look at, is it the brother of your driver when you went there in 2014?
Mm.
We look at them and we look at how they were meant to, one of them was meant to actually go on a ship, and then how that's
Yeah.
ship sacked. Can you tell the audience a bit about that? Because that's just...
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. And I love that you mentioned that, because I mean, that is so relevant to the UK situation right now in the news, with these stories of sort of the dinghies and everything like this. And yeah, I mean, that's just incredible to think that this whole, as you say, the whole kind of migrant story or migration story in Europe has been developing over the last several years, and sort of hasn't gone away really. We don't seem to find any answers to it. But certainly one of the characters in the film, as you say, the taxi driver, his brother, was in such a kind of economically depressed state that he actually indeed wanted to take a boat from Gaza, break the naval blockade, which is itself a massively dubious thing to try to do, and then actually to onward travel to Europe. And the boat that they were planning on taking, excuse me, it's not actually the brother, it's the taxi driver, as it's playing out in my head. It's not his brother, he was telling his brother. So it's the taxi driver that we worked with. He actually, in a sense, was saved taking the boat in which everyone ended up drowning, because his house was destroyed in an airstrike, which is an incredible sort of perversion of reality in a sense,
That's just something that's just crazy. So I think we have lost the picture. We can still hear you, Harry. Just want to ask as well, the production over in Gaza, how was it filming over there? So did you learn anything different? What was the experience both on and off the set?
Yeah, you seem to have lost my picture. But whether or not you can still hear me, I don't know. You seem to be able to hear me, but now I can't hear you, which is just quite incredible. So I'm actually going to refresh the page.
Yes, do that.
That fixes it.
Again, for the audience, bear with us.
Live streaming.
Yes. There we go. Okay, it's appearing again.
There
in
it is.
3, 2, here he is again. Okay, nice. We can see you again. Sorry, pick up where you were. I think it was a question that Joe posed to you, right?
Yeah, it was just about the actual production of the documentary. So filming in Gaza, how was that? And so did you learn anything different? What was the experience on and off the set? That sort of thing.
Well, getting to Gaza is a privilege on a privilege, because actually even being able to get in, you need special permissions. And this production was basically sponsored by RT UK, and because RT as a parent news organization is on a list of approved Israeli approved news organizations, we're able to get access at all, which is in a miracle in itself. In terms of then actually producing the film, boy, that was very difficult. At so many different levels. First of all, we didn't feel safe staying in Gaza for more than 7 or 8 days, because at the time that we did the main shoot, I suppose, to put it in a sense, Gaza was in the darkness, and the rise of ISIS at that time was a concern there in terms of the kidnap threat. So we were actually very much going in and out in a very intense way. So what you see in the film is basically all that we filmed, in a sense, in terms of the actual narrative or character content. what you see is everything we filmed, in a sense. Obviously, the interview content was longer, but the main storyline components were everything we filmed in 7 days, or
So
less, actually.
you were able
And then,
to. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just going to say, did you feel changed through the making of this film? There were ideas you had in mind you wanted to pick, and then when you arrived, something completely attracted and made the storyline in a way change.
Yeah, you're right on that. Completely. It did evolve, and in fact, to be honest with you, as I kind of said earlier, I really wanted this just to be very real and very unsexed up. And I actually know that the main weakness of the film is, in a sense, it's not sexy enough. But I think that people who really want to see reality will enjoy the film, because it's not sexed up in a media sense or a filmic sense for the sake of it, but that was deliberate. So why am I saying that? I'm saying that because, in a sense, I wanted to go see and feel what's really happening and talk to people, not on Facebook or FaceTime, but face to face. How are you? What is happening? What's happened these years later? And did the story change in comparison to what I expected to find? Yes, because to be honest with you, as I say in the kind of the epilogue of the film, if you want, or the final chapter, I mean, I was just shocked to see that, old friends or colleagues and etc. They just look like they've been living in a white padded room in some cases, in terms of the kind of you feel the weight of depression on them. And it's almost like the war ended yesterday and they're still kind of, I say in the film, shell-shocked looking. And in a sense that has got better, by the way, in the last year or two, but in a sense it hasn't. So that was a big shock. The other thing, which is much more anecdotal, was that in the cases of our main heroes or characters in the story, they were randomly sampled. So in as much as sort of everyone in the film has trauma symptoms, that's representative by random sample. And so one of the characters in the film, Malak, she talks about her fear of loud noises, or her trauma response to loud noises, for instance. But actually, it's very interesting that was so normalized in her life as a thing, and in the community, the culture, and the language, that for the first 45 minutes of interviewing Malak, she was certain that she had no quote unquote sort of negative response to the war experience. And it's only when certain kind of teasers or nudges or specific questions were raised, also with the help of her family, who were basically with us, part of the storytelling. So in that sense, it's very organic. Did she start to think and realize that actually, yeah, those aren't normal. They're actually problems. They're actually because of the war. They're actually trauma. And so that was a real evolution, because you can imagine 35 minutes into the interview and the cameraman behind me is saying, I think we should just find, quote unquote, find another kid, because there's nothing wrong with this one. Well, there is something wrong, but you need to be very patient, to find the right way of getting that story out.
Yeah, and that's something you definitely do very well, and your team do well. So after release this documentary, have you got anything else? What's the next project for you?
Well, pre-COVID, my next project was to be in Sudan.
Okay.
That has been slightly scuppered by COVID. And quite frankly, I've been in France the last 3 months. It's dangerous enough in France. It's the R rate has just jumped back up to around 1.4, which is the same as it was at the height of the pandemic in March. So if that's France, I'm not too secure going to Sudan or Tunisia or Lebanon, where I was planning on going next. So the answer is I don't know, and I don't know as much as everyone else doesn't know what those kinds of things have in store as a result of COVID yet.
Right. But do you have an idea in mind of the next project, or is still you wanted to be inspired? You were going to go to Sudan and feel what you were going to tell based on what will come to you?
Yeah, the Sudan story was based on a kind of look up at what's happened sort of post-revolution from last winter, and really just a kind of an evergreen story, just to look at even the characters of the revolution, to catch up with them. And also I have some special access as a result of a friend who is a relative of the new president, prime minister, who was installed as since the revolution. So that was the idea of that. So that would have been a sort of, to explain, I suppose, a sort of Al Jazeera style documentary in a sense, but I would have produced that independently. That was what was in mind. But it may be that materializes through remotely directing it instead. And actually, some of Gaza Still Alive was remotely directed, because after the first visit, most of the B-roll footage is remotely directed.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah. Harry, thank you so much for speaking with us today. So, Gaza Still Alive, or audience at home, you guys can go on to mirrorband.com, subscribe, watch all the films, and even vote for your favourite film. Do give Gaza Still Alive a watch, and if it is your favourite, make sure you do vote for it, because the winner of the Audience Award, which will be announced tomorrow during Sunday's award ceremony, will win a laurel and an extra coupon code for iPitch.tv platform. So do make sure you check that out. Jay, Harry, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Cheers, guys.